You come to me with the weight of invisible chains around your spirit, worn thin by years of carrying burdens that were never yours to bear. Your eyes hold the particular exhaustion of one who has poured themselves out like water, believing that to love meant to disappear, that to care meant to suffer endlessly for others. But I see something else now, a flicker of recognition, a dawning awareness that the very act of your withdrawal, your sacred stepping back, creates tremors in the foundation of relationships built upon your depletion. This is not about anger, though anger may have been the catalyst. This is not about punishment, though others will interpret it as such. This is about the fundamental psychological principle that Jung called individuation, the soul's inexorable movement toward wholeness, even when that movement appears to others as abandonment, when the empath finally steps away, when they choose their own healing over the maintenance of others' comfort. They initiate what can only be described as a cosmic rebalancing. You must understand that your entire existence has been structured around what I call the invisible contract, an unconscious agreement written in the blood of your earliest wounds. This contract states that your worth is measured by your availability, your goodness proven by your willingness to absorb pain, your love validated only through the endless outpouring of your essential self. But contracts written in unconsciousness can be dissolved through consciousness, and your withdrawal is the first signature on that dissolution. The psychological dynamics at play here are both archetypal and personal. You have been living as what I term the perpetual mother, not necessarily in the biological sense, but in the psychic sense of being the eternal nurturer, the endless source, the inexhaustible well. This archetype, when unconsciously embodied, becomes a prison where the self is sacrificed on the altar of others' needs. Your stepping away represents the death of this false identity and the birth of something far more authentic. Consider the profound disruption that occurs when the one who has always been the emotional foundation suddenly removes themselves from the equation. Those who have built their sense of stability upon your constancy experience what can only be described as psychic vertigo. They reach for support that is no longer there, call for a response that no longer comes, expect accommodation that is no longer offered. In their disorientation, they finally feel the true weight of what you have been carrying all along. This is where the notion of revenge becomes relevant, not as a conscious act of retaliation, but as the natural consequence of truth finally being revealed. Your absence becomes a mirror that reflects the stark reality of how one-sided these relationships have been. Where once your presence masked the imbalance, your withdrawal exposes it with surgical precision. Those who took your devotion for granted are forced to confront the magnitude of their own emotional dependence. The psychological mechanism behind this phenomenon lies in what Jung called projection. Others have projected their disowned qualities onto you, the capacity for unconditional love, their ability to heal, the connection to the divine feminine. Through this projection, they could experience these qualities vicariously while avoiding the inner work necessary to develop them within themselves. Your withdrawal forces the return of these projections, compelling others to face what they have been avoiding in their own psyche. Dreams often herald this transformation long before the conscious mind recognizes its necessity. You may have dreamed of drowning,
of being pulled under by invisible hands, of running through endless corridors searching for an exit. These are not merely psychological metaphors, but actual maps of your soul's journey toward liberation. The unconscious speaks in symbols, and these symbols have been preparing you for the sacred act of self-rescue. The terror that others feel at your withdrawal speaks to something deeper than mere inconvenience. At an unconscious level, they recognize that you represent their own potential for wholeness, their own capacity for authentic love. When you remove yourself from the dynamic, you are essentially saying, I will no longer be the repository for what you refuse to claim within yourself. This forces a confrontation with their own shadow, the parts of themselves they have relegated to the darkness while living in the borrowed light of your devotion. Your stepping away is what alchemists call the separatio, the necessary separation that must occur before true union becomes possible. In relationships built upon codependency and unconscious projection, there can be no genuine intimacy because there is no true differentiation. Your withdrawal creates the space necessary for each person to discover who they are when they are not defined by their role in the dynamic of mutual dependence. The guilt that arises as you contemplate this withdrawal is itself a testament to how deeply the false programming has penetrated your psyche. You have been conditioned to believe that your needs are secondary, your boundaries optional, your well-being negotiable. This conditioning often originates in childhood, where survival may have depended upon your ability to sense and respond to the emotional climate of unstable caregivers. What began as an adaptive strategy became a life sentence of self-abandonment. But the soul, what I call the self, the archetype of wholeness, will not tolerate this betrayal indefinitely. It begins to rebel through symptoms that cannot be ignored. Chronic fatigue, unexplained illness, depression that seems to have no external cause. These are not signs of personal failure, but rather the psyche's way of enforcing the boundaries that the conscious mind has been too afraid to set. Your body becomes your ally in the work of reclamation. The process of withdrawal often begins with what appears to be a minor incident, a request too many, a demand too great, a moment when the fragile infrastructure of your overgiving finally collapses. But this incident is merely the catalyst for a process that has been building in the unconscious for years. The straw that breaks the camel's back is never really about the straw. It is about the accumulation of weight that has finally exceeded the soul's capacity to bear. When you begin to pull back, you may be surprised by the intensity of others' reactions. Those who barely seem to notice your constant availability suddenly become hyper-aware of its absence. They may accuse you of selfishness, of coldness, of betrayal. These accusations are projections of their own panic at losing the source of emotional regulation they have come to depend upon. They are not describing your reality. They are expressing their own terror at being forced to develop internal resources they have long neglected. The most profound aspect of your withdrawal is that it forces others to confront the reality of their own wholeness. When you're no longer available to be their emotional prosthetic, they must discover their own capacity for self-soothing, their own connection to wisdom, their own ability to navigate life's challenges. Many will resist this growth, preferring to villainize you rather than embrace the opportunity for authentic development. Dreams during this period often feature imagery of breaking free from underwater depths, of emerging from dark caves into sunlight, of cutting cords that have bound you to others. These symbols reflect the psychic reality of what you're experiencing, a liberation from the unconscious agreements that have kept you trapped in patterns of self-sacrifice. The unconscious is celebrating your choice to reclaim your own life. Your withdrawal creates what I call sacred disruption, a disturbance in the field of relationship that forces everyone involved to examine their authentic motivations. Those who were genuinely connected to you as a person will respect your need for space and use the separation as an opportunity for their own growth. Those who were connected only to your function will resist, manipulate, and eventually reveal the true nature of their attachment. The silence that accompanies your withdrawal is itself a form of teaching. In a world addicted to explanation and justification, your refusal to defend your choice to prioritize your own well-being becomes a radical act. This silence is not passive, but powerfully active. It is the voice of the self asserting its right to exist without constant negotiation or apology. As you maintain this sacred distance, you begin to encounter aspects of yourself that have been dormant for years. The creative impulses that were sacrificed to others' emotional needs, the dreams that were deferred in service of their crises, the voice that was silenced to maintain false peace. These aspects of your authentic self begin to stir, like seeds that have been waiting underground for the right conditions to sprout. The process of reclamation is not without its challenges. You may experience periods of intense loneliness as you learn to be your own companion after years of being everyone else's emotional support system. This loneliness is not a sign that you've made a mistake. It is the necessary emptiness that precedes authentic fullness. You are learning to distinguish between solitude and isolation, between chosen withdrawal and enforced exile. Your former role as the family or group emotional regulator may have given you a sense of importance, even if it was built upon your own depletion. Stepping away from this role means facing the question of who you are when you are not needed, what you are worth when you are not useful. This existential inquiry is frightening, but essential for the development of authentic self-worth. The archetypal pattern you're breaking is ancient and deeply embedded in the collective unconscious. It is the pattern of the sacrificial victim, the one who must be consumed so that others may live. By refusing to continue in this role, you are challenging not only personal dynamics, but cultural and spiritual assumptions about the nature of love and service. Your withdrawal becomes an act of collective healing. Others may attempt to lure you back into the old pattern through the various means, sudden declarations of love, manufactured crises that require your intervention, guilt tactics that play upon your conditioned responses. And these attempts are not necessarily conscious manipulations, but rather the death throes of a dynamic that has outlived its usefulness. The unconscious will fight to maintain familiar patterns, even when those patterns are destructive. Your task during this period is to develop what I call conscious boundaries, limits that arise not from anger or resentment, but from self-respect and clarity about what serves the highest good of all involved. These boundaries are not walls, but membranes permeable to love and authentic connection, while filtering out that which would drain or diminish your essential self. The transformation that occurs during your withdrawal is alchemical in nature. You are taking the base metal of your people-pleasing tendencies and transmuting it into the gold of authentic compassion. True compassion, as the Buddhist teachings remind us, must include the self. A love that demands self-destruction is not love but a perversion of love, a shadow masquerading as light. As you continue this process of conscious separation, you may notice that your dreams begin to change. Where once you dreamed of being chased or trapped, you now dream of flying, of vast open spaces, of animals that guide rather than threaten. These are signs that your psyche is healing, that the deep structures of your being are reorganizing around a healthier center. The most profound revenge against those who have taken your devotion for granted is not anger or punishment, but your own wholeness. When you stop being available as a receptacle for their unconscious projections, when you refuse to carry what rightfully belongs to them, you force them to confront the reality of their own spiritual and emotional development. Some will rise to this challenge. Others will seek new sources of unconscious support. Your withdrawal often reveals the difference between those who love you and those who love what you do for them. This distinction, while painful to recognize, is essential for building authentic relationships in the future. Those who can love you even when you are not serving their needs, who can support your growth even when it inconveniences them. These are the people worthy of your renewed connection. The period of withdrawal is also a time of mourning, not only for the relationships that cannot survive your newfound boundaries, but for the version of yourself that you must leave behind. The self-sacrificing empath, while noble in intention, was ultimately a false self built upon the denial of your own needs and desires. Grieving this identity is necessary for the birth of your authentic self. During this transformation, you may experience what mystics call the dark night of the soul, a period where old sources of meaning have fallen away, but new ones have not yet emerged. This liminal space, while uncomfortable, is sacred. It is the void from which all creation emerges, the fertile darkness that precedes the dawn. Trust the process even when you cannot see the destination. Your withdrawal forces others to confront what Jung called the shadow, the aspects of themselves they have rejected or refused to acknowledge. When you're no longer available to carry the disowned emotions, to be the repository for their unloved lives, they must face these aspects directly. This confrontation is often projected back onto you in the form of blame or criticism, but these projections reveal more about their internal state than about your actions. The silence that accompanies your withdrawal is not empty, but pregnant with possibility. In this silence, you learn to distinguish between your own voice and the internalized voices of others that have guided your decisions for so long. You begin to ask different questions, not what do they need from me, but what do I need from myself? Not how can I fix this, but is this mine to fix? As the process continues, you may notice that your very presence begins to shift. The anxious energy of someone always anticipating others' needs is replaced by the calm-centeredness of someone who knows their own worth. This shift is palpable to others, even if they cannot articulate what has changed. Some will find this new energy threatening. Others will find it inspiring. The relationships that survive your transformation are those that were built upon genuine mutual respect rather than unconscious dependence. These connections deepen during your withdrawal, as they are freed from the distortions of projection and codependency. You discover what it means to love and be loved without the exhausting burden of constant emotional management. Your journey of withdrawal also reconnects you with your own creativity and passion, aspects of yourself that may have been dormant while your energy was constantly directed outward. You rediscover hobbies abandoned, dreams deferred, talents that were sacrificed on the altar of others' needs. This creative renaissance is not selfish, but essential. It represents the return of your vital essence. The financial and practical aspects of your life may also shift during this period. Relationships built upon your overgiving often involve material imbalances, as well as emotional ones. As you set boundaries around your energy, you may also need to set boundaries around your resources, time, and practical support. This is not meanness, but wisdom, the recognition that sustainable giving must flow from abundance, not depletion. Your transformation serves as a catalyst for others' growth, whether they recognize it or not. By refusing to enable their spiritual and emotional laziness, you create the conditions necessary for their own individuation. Some will thank you for this gift years later. Others may never understand it. Your responsibility isn't to ensure their growth, but to model what it looks like to choose wholeness over comfort. The archetype of the wounded healer that you have embodied must evolve into the whole healer. One who serves from fullness rather than emptiness, who gives from choice rather than compulsion. This evolution requires that you heal the wounds that made you so available to others' pain in the first place. Only by addressing your own needs can you truly serve the needs of others. As you establish firmer boundaries, you may be surprised to discover that your actual capacity for compassion increases rather than decreases. When you're no longer depleted by inappropriate demands on your energy, you have more authentic care to offer to those who truly need and value it. Quality replaces quantity in your emotional investments. The guilt that may arise around your new boundaries is often a signal that you are making necessary changes. Those who have benefited from your overgiving will naturally resist your growth and may attempt to reinstall the old dynamic through the guilt manipulation. Your ability to sit with this guilt without immediately reverting to old patterns is a measure of your spiritual development. Your withdrawal creates space not only for your own healing, but for the authentic relationships that will form the foundation of your future. When you are no longer desperately seeking validation through service, you become attractive to those who value you for your inherent worth rather than your utility. These new connections are characterized by reciprocity rather than depletion. The process of reclaiming your energy often involves literally calling back the pieces of yourself that you have left scattered throughout your relationships. This is not metaphorical, but actual psychic work. The conscious retrieval of your vital essence from the psyches of others where it has been stored and utilized. As you reclaim these aspects of yourself, you feel more whole, more present, more alive. Your former tendency to absorb others' emotions begins to transform into a more conscious and boundaried form of empathy.
You learn to feel with others without losing yourself in their experience, to offer support without taking responsibility for their choices, to care without carrying. This mature empathy is far more helpful to others than the unconscious merging that characterized your previous relationships. The seasonal nature of your withdrawal becomes apparent over time. Like trees that must shed their leaves in winter to survive and bloom in spring, you must release what no longer serves to make room for new growth. This cyclical understanding helps you see your withdrawal not as a failure, but as a natural part of your evolution. As you continue to honor your own needs and boundaries, you may notice that your physical health begins to improve. The chronic fatigue, headaches, or mysterious ailments that plagued you during your years of overgiving begin to resolve as your energy is no longer constantly depleted. Your body celebrates your choice to stop betraying yourself. The spiritual dimension of your withdrawal cannot be overlooked. In many traditions, the hermit or the mystic must withdraw from worldly concerns to commune with the divine. Your retreat from overgiving creates space for a deeper connection with your own spiritual resources, with the source of authentic love and wisdom that flows through you rather than from you. Your experience of time also shifts during this period. Where once every moment was filled with attending to others' needs, you now have space for reflection, for simply being, rather than constantly doing. This temporal spaciousness allows you to reconnect with your own rhythms, your own needs for rest and restoration.
The relationships that you maintain during your withdrawal are transformed by your new boundaries. Those who are capable of growth rise to meet your higher standards, discovering their own capacity for emotional maturity and reciprocal care. Those evolving relationships become models for what authentic connection can look like when both parties are committed to their own wholeness. Your withdrawal also serves as a teaching for any children who observe it. Rather than modeling self-sacrifice as the highest virtue, you demonstrate that healthy relationships require mutual respect and reciprocity. This lesson may be the greatest gift you can offer to the next generation, showing them that love does not require the annihilation of the self. As the initial shock of your withdrawal settles, you begin to attract different types of people into your life. Those drawn to your new energy are typically individuals who have done their own inner work, who value authenticity over convenience, who are capable of meeting you at the level of depth and integrity you now embody. The creative projects and personal goals that were perpetually deferred during your years of overgiving finally have the space and energy they need to manifest. You discover talents you had forgotten, passions that were buried under the weight of others' demands, dreams that are ready to be pursued with the full force of your reclaimed vitality. Your relationship with solitude undergoes a profound transformation. Where once you feared being alone because it meant facing your own emptiness, you now cherish solitude as a sanctuary where you can commune with your authentic self. This shift from loneliness to solitude is a hallmark of psychological maturity. The practice of saying no becomes easier as you recognize that every no to what doesn't serve you is a yes to what does. This discernment, while initially challenging, becomes second nature as you attune to the wisdom of your own body and intuition. Your no becomes a complete sentence, requiring no justification or explanation. Your withdrawal ultimately reveals itself to be not an end but a beginning, not a rejection of relationship but a preparation for relationships of unprecedented depth and authenticity. By refusing to settle for connections built upon your depletion, you create space for connections built upon mutual respect, genuine care, and the celebration of each other's wholeness. The revenge that others experience is not your intention, but rather the natural consequence of truth being revealed. When you stop colluding with dysfunctional dynamics, those dynamics are exposed for what they truly are. This exposure can be painful for those who have been unconscious, but it also offers them the opportunity for genuine growth and transformation. In the end, your quiet withdrawal becomes a sacred act of creation, the creation of a life that honors your inherent worth, the creation of relationships that nourish rather than drain, the creation of a legacy that teaches others what it means to love without losing oneself. This is the most profound gift you can offer to the world. The example of a soul that chose wholeness over suffering, authenticity over approval, truth over comfortable illusion. Your silence speaks louder than words ever could. Your absence teaches what your presence never managed to convey. Your peace becomes the most powerful statement you've ever made. And in this quiet revolution, you discover that the greatest revenge is not punishment, but transformation. Not hurting others, but healing yourself. Not diminishing anyone, but finally claiming the fullness of who you were, always meant to be.